My dad skipped my wedding for my sister's party, so I let the ones who truly raised me walk me down the aisle and watch his world crumble. For a very long time, I have always known that my parents loved my oldest sister, Vicky, more than me. She was the planned child, while I was the result of an accidental pregnancy just 10 months later. They probably didn't even want me but decided to keep the pregnancy anyway. My mother's parents had passed away before I was born, but my dad's parents were very much alive, so they took on a significant role in my upbringing. Grandma and Grandpa were the constants in my life, providing the love and support that I often felt lacking from my own parents. I remember many instances when my parents would leave me behind with my grandparents and only take my sister for trips. When I was young, I didn't mind because it was fun living with my grandparents, but as I grew older, around 6 or 8 years old, I realized just how unfair this was. My problem wasn't just with my parents, it was also with my sister, Vicky. While I harbored no ill will toward Vicky, I couldn't help but feel like an unwanted addition to the family. She knew that as well and made me feel like a stranger every day in my own home. She would always compete with me for everything, be it grades, attention from our parents, or even the smallest accomplishments. It felt like a constant battle for validation, and I was always on the losing end because my parents preferred her. On one occasion, Vicky wanted to be friends with a group of girls but was afraid to approach them because she was nerdy. One of the girls and I had art classes together, so she introduced me to the rest of the group, and we all started hanging out together. Vicky was so jealous of this that she made my parents talk to me about including her whenever I was with them. I tried to resist, but my mother called me selfish, while my dad said she was my sister and I should look after her. Begrudgingly, I agreed and introduced Vicky to the rest of the girls. Vicky doesn't have many friends, so she can come off as overenthusiastic. She constantly tried to impress the girls in our group, often coming across as intrusive. Despite her efforts, she struggled to find her place among them, and the awkward tension between Vicky and the other girls was always palpable. For example, one of the girls had a crush on a guy, so Vicky took it upon herself to approach him and let him know the girl liked him. He laughed because he wasn't interested and went on to tell everyone about it, which embarrassed the girl. After this, the girls firmly told me they didn't want me to bring Vicky to our hangouts anymore, so I agreed. However, Vicky wasn't having it. She threw a tantrum when she found out the girls wanted nothing to do with her and went to our parents, insisting I shouldn't hang out with these mean girls either since I was her sister and should stand up for her. I refused and told her it was her own fault they didn't want to be friends with her. As usual, my parents supported her. They lectured me about how Vicky had no ill intentions and that I should try to convince the girls to forgive her, but if they didn't, I should cut them off too. I refused and put my foot down. I liked hanging out with those girls, and unlike Vicky, I wasn't going to jeopardize my friendships in any way. I told my parents I had had enough and that it wasn't up to me to find friends for Vicky. My parents were furious and gave me the silent treatment for weeks, but I'm glad I stuck to my guns. This group of girls has continued to be my friends to this day and is basically like my sisters. I have cried with them, laughed with them, and shared some of the most meaningful moments of my life. At the time, though, it was hard to stand firm in my decision. There were moments when doubt crept in, and I questioned whether I had made the right choice in prioritizing my own happiness over what my parents wanted. This wasn't the only reason Vicky grew to resent me. There was another incident involving a boy she had a crush on. I had no idea about her feelings for him. He and I were friends and sat together for some classes. He tried to ask me out to junior prom, but I politely declined since I was already going with someone I liked. When Vicky found out, she made a huge scene and cried about it, telling my parents I always took things she wanted and that I was knowingly flirting with a guy for months. She called me a bunch of nasty words no one should say to their sister and told my parents she wished I wasn't her sister. My mother sided with her, telling me it was wrong of me and that, as a sister, I should respect girl code. I tried explaining that I wasn't interested in the guy and had declined his invitation, so she was free to ask him if she wanted, but Vicky refused to let it go. Looking back, I think she knew the guy would have rejected her anyway, so she took her frustration out on me since he asked me instead of her. Once, my dad took me out for ice cream, saying he wanted to spend some father-daughter time with me. This never happened, so I was really pleased. However, he started asking me questions like whether my boyfriend and I were being careful, if my boyfriend came from a good family, or if we ever did drugs. I was taken aback by his line of questioning and asked what he meant. That's when my dad revealed that Vicky had been making up stories for months, telling my parents I was doing drugs and drinking alcohol with my boyfriend. This was a complete lie, and I showed my dad my phone to verify that Vicky was lying. When my dad confronted her, she tried to justify it by saying no one our age just hangs out with a guy and that I was hiding things from everyone. I was so furious that I yelled at her for creating unnecessary drama and told her it wasn't my fault she had no one to date, but she needed to keep her nose out of my business. Vicky didn't like that and punched me. It happened out of nowhere since she had never been physically violent before. My nose started bleeding as I fell to the ground, clutching my face in pain. My parents rushed me to the emergency room, pleading with me not to file a police complaint against Vicky. They kept saying it would ruin her life while I sat in the back seat, clutching my face. Vicky didn't even care or apologize. When the nurse asked about the incident, I told her the truth, and she called Child Protective Services, CPS. My parents were furious with me for involving CPS, viewing it as a betrayal of family loyalty. In their eyes, Vicky's actions were dismissed as a mere accident, an isolated incident that shouldn't warrant such drastic intervention. They pleaded with the authorities, insisting Vicky wasn't a danger to me and that her actions were out of character. In the end, Vicky was let go, but they warned my parents they would keep a close eye on our situation in case any other accidents happened to me. As you can imagine, Vicky was really shaken up, and so were my parents. Later, they told me they were disappointed in me for trying to ruin my sister's life. My mother started to cry, saying I was tearing the family apart by involving outsiders. My father's disappointment was palpable, his words heavy with reproach as he questioned my decision to escalate the situation. I told him firmly that I wanted Vicky out of my life, and they agreed. I felt guilty about involving the authorities, but for the first time, I felt safe in my own home. Once Vicky had been formally warned, my parents had a separate conversation with her, and since that day, she stopped talking to me altogether. I much prefer this over her constantly hovering around me or trying to insert herself into my life. When my grandparents found out about this incident, they asked me to pack my bags so I could live with them for the remainder of high school. They informed my parents, who didn't protest much, so I left to live with my grandparents. Unlike at my parents' place, I felt safe and loved there. The remaining days of high school went well, and I made lasting memories with my friends. My parents never once visited or called me throughout that time. I knew they were happy with their beloved daughter, so I never tried to contact them, even though it hurt that they could so easily discard me like I was nothing. When I graduated high school, my parents only showed up to cheer for Vicky. They didn't even congratulate me or approach me, and it felt like I was a stranger to them. However, my grandparents were there and scolded my parents for being so blatantly obvious about their favoritism. I don't know what my grandfather told them, but my dad later approached me awkwardly and congratulated me. Later, I found out I was accepted into a good college with a full scholarship. I was so happy because I dreaded asking my parents for financial help. I informed my grandparents, and they offered to take me out to a nice restaurant for dinner. After dinner, my grandmother posted pictures of me on her Facebook account, writing a long caption about how proud she was of me for being such an exceptional student. Our relatives soon found out and chimed in, congratulating me. I guess some of them reached out to my parents, who had no idea about my achievement. Instead of feeling happy, my mother called the next day to tell me Vicky had locked herself in her room, crying because she hadn't been accepted by any college yet. She said I was knowingly trying to make my sister feel bad about her grades by talking to our relatives. She blamed me, saying it was my fault because I was apparently depressed after the CPS incident and had pushed Vicky into bad grades. I was unbelievably heartbroken that my own mother could blame me for such a thing, and that was the last time I spoke with her for a very long time. My grandparents helped me move into my college dorm. Due to my high school boyfriend's college being far away, we had broken up, so I went into college single and ready to embrace the next chapter of my life with newfound independence and determination. The breakup was difficult, but I was excited to meet new people. That's where I met Rob. He and I were both freshmen, and we spent half our days in the library. Rob was unlike anyone I had ever met. His quiet demeanor and studious nature mirrored my own, and we quickly found common ground in our shared love for academia. As weeks turned into months, our friendship blossomed into something deeper, and I realized I had developed feelings for Rob that went beyond mere friendship. Being an extrovert, I was upfront about my feelings, and I was surprised to learn he felt the same way. We started going out and have been strong for 8 years. My grandparents met Rob, and they absolutely adore him. I met Rob's parents, who treat me like their own daughter. On occasion, Rob's mother has confessed she always wanted a daughter, so she's glad Rob met someone like me. To be honest, this is the first time I've been surrounded by family members who like me and don't resent me. I've told Rob stories about my childhood, and he listens with empathy and understanding. Throughout these last 8 years, my parents have hardly contacted me except to send an occasional birthday text if they remembered, but that's it. Recently, Rob and I got engaged. He proposed while we were trekking to our usual spot to watch the sunrise, and it was a dreamy proposal. It was so sweet how nervous he was to pop the question, and I had no doubts when I accepted. I posted pictures of my engagement on Instagram and informed my grandparents, who were thrilled and congratulated us. I guess the news spread because my parents called out of the blue to congratulate me. I thought it was just a casual conversation since we hadn't talked in years. They asked about my life, job, and apartment before my dad straightforwardly asked if he could walk me down the aisle. I was taken aback by his sudden question since, just moments ago, he didn't even know which company I worked for. I told him I hadn't thought about it yet, and he said it would be embarrassing if I didn't ask him, as others would question it, so it was better if he walked me down the aisle. I scoffed and told my parents I didn't even know if I was inviting them to my wedding since we hadn't been in contact. This upset them. My mother told me how disappointed she was, emphasizing the importance of family and tradition. She said they would always be my parents no matter what and that I should let bygones be bygones. Part of me was tempted to listen and accept my dad's offer because I wanted our relationship to mend, but another part hesitated, wary of opening myself up to disappointment and hurt again. However, since I was entering a new chapter of my life, I told my dad he could walk me down the aisle, and he seemed overjoyed. During the wedding planning, I reached out to my high school girlfriends, with whom I've stayed in touch despite the physical distance due to our careers. I told them I wanted the gang back together and for them to be my bridesmaids. There were many happy tears and congratulations, and they accepted without hesitation, embracing the opportunity to reunite and celebrate this milestone together. We planned to go to Vegas for my bachelorette party, while Rob had a separate bachelor party with his friends. My friends and I posted pictures from the party, and everyone had fun. However, when I returned home, my parents called to express their disappointment that I hadn't invited Vicky to the celebration. I told them there was no way I would have involved Vicky in my bachelorette party and that I didn't want her in my life. This surprised them, and they asked what I meant. I clarified that Vicky's actions, particularly her history of deceit and betrayal, had left me deeply wounded and mistrustful of her intentions. I couldn't fathom inviting her to such an intimate and joyous occasion, knowing her presence would cast a shadow over the festivities. I also informed them this was why she wasn't invited to my wedding. Hearing this, my parents lost it. They went off about how I had no right to exclude my sister and that it was my duty as her sister to include her in such important events. They said Vicky had been looking forward to meeting me after learning I was getting married. I was confused and asked what gave her that idea since we hadn't spoken in years, but they brushed my concerns aside, saying this isn't how sisters behave. I told them I understood their perspective, but they had to understand that my relationship with Vicky was complicated. After everything that happened, I didn't feel comfortable having her at my wedding. She hadn't even apologized for everything she put me through. As usual, my parents ignored my words. My mother kept saying she wanted what was best for the family and that inviting Vicky wasn't a big deal. My dad insisted our relatives would talk about why my sister wasn't invited, casting a negative light on my wedding. However, I knew better than to yield to their demands, so I stood firm. I told them I was okay with people talking behind my back and questioning my character as long as I was surrounded by people I liked and trusted at my wedding. My mother asked if my fiancé would be okay with this and said my in-laws would judge me for being so cruel as to exclude my sister. I laughed and informed them that my fiancé and in-laws knew about my family dynamics and wouldn't care if Vicky was present. They urged me to reconsider, emphasizing family unity and forgiveness, but I remained steadfast, unwilling to compromise my well-being to appease others. We agreed to disagree, each holding our perspectives, and my parents said they needed to think things over. We ended the conversation there. I informed my grandparents about this, feeling guilty for standing up to my parents, and they had my back. They told me I shouldn't force myself to invite anyone I didn't want and that my parents were, as usual, trying to guilt-trip me. Since that conversation, I felt better about my decision and got distracted with wedding planning. As my wedding approached, my dad called last week to say he and mom had thought long and hard and would no longer attend the wedding. Before I could react, he added that this meant he wouldn't walk me down the aisle. I asked if there was a specific reason, and he said Vicky was moving to a new place soon, which they had helped her find. Since I was excluding her from the wedding, she decided to host a housewarming party that same day, so they would attend that instead. I felt a mix of shock and disbelief as I processed my father's words. The realization that my sister's housewarming took precedence over my wedding was a bitter pill to swallow, exacerbating the hurt and betrayal I had felt for years. I simply told him I understood and hung up. Although I tried to act brave, the pain of rejection cut deeper than words could express. When I told Rob, he was furious about how insensitive my parents could be, especially since they had insisted on being invited. He suggested I ask my grandfather, as he and grandma had been there for me more than my parents. I agreed, so I called my grandparents and asked if they would walk me down the aisle. Tears welled up in my eyes as I spoke, overcome with emotion at how much they meant to me. You and Grandpa have always been there for me, I said, my voice choked with emotion. You've been more than just grandparents, you've been like parents, and I can't imagine anyone else I'd rather have by my side on my wedding day. My grandparents didn't hesitate before saying yes. They told me how honored they would be to walk me down the aisle and, unlike my parents, they wouldn't disappoint me. Their words reassured me, and I felt a profound sense of peace and contentment. I also talked to my in-laws, and Rob's parents assured me they didn't care if my parents attended and were delighted to support our union regardless. My wedding is in 2 days, and today I woke up to several missed calls from my dad. I called him back, thinking it was an emergency. When he picked up, he asked if it was true that my grandparents were walking me down the aisle. I confirmed it was true. He went off about how disrespectful it was to ask my grandparents. I reminded him he had declined to attend, so I didn't see why he was upset. He yelled that he and Mom were trying to make me see the wrong of my ways, thinking declining the invitation would teach me a lesson. He said they had raised me, paid for my food and education, so my grandparents had no right to replace him. I tried to reason with him, explaining that my grandparents had been there for me in ways he and Mom never were, but he wouldn't listen. He also said I had done nothing but alienate everyone, and this was all my fault. Since this conversation, I've been wondering if I really did something wrong here. Am I the asshole for asking my grandparents to walk me down the aisle? Wow, I didn't expect so many people to comment on my post. I've seen a lot of advice and suggestions on how to approach this situation. I agree that I need to cut off my parents permanently because their constant back and forth is exhausting and starting to affect my mental health. I don't want them in my life when they've consistently shown that Vicky is their priority. My parents are indeed selfish, and I've known that for a long time. However, how can a child just stop loving their parents? It's much easier said than done. It's very difficult to actually do it. However, for my mental peace, I have no choice but to do this so I can enjoy my wedding tomorrow. Sorry for the lack of updates this past month, but I've been quite busy since my wedding. First of all, yes, my wedding went quite well with my grandparents by my side as I walked down the aisle. Despite the absence of my parents, I felt a deep sense of joy as I exchanged vows with Rob, committing to spend the rest of our lives together. My girlfriends and I danced the night away, and I can't begin to describe how important it is to stay in touch with your childhood friends no matter what, because sometimes they are your chosen family. During the reception, I felt a twinge of sadness realizing my parents weren't there to share this moment, especially as I watched Rob's parents and cousins give speeches to him. However, I took solace in knowing I had made the right decision for myself, prioritizing my well-being and happiness. Some of my girlfriends gave speeches, sharing memories of our experiences and the bond that carried us through good times and bad. In the days following the wedding, Rob and I went on our honeymoon, which his parents paid for as a wedding gift. I spent my days lazing around, enjoying myself with my husband. I feel so giddy every time I look at Rob and realize he's married to me now. As I mentioned earlier, I cut off my parents by blocking them everywhere. I didn't bother sending them an explanation because, frankly, they don't deserve one. I have no idea whether Vicky had a housewarming that day or if it was just an excuse for my parents not to attend my wedding, but at this point, I don't care. I wish nothing but the best to them and their beloved daughter. I wasn't going to update further since my last update, but something unexpected happened, and I thought you all deserved to know. I haven't checked my email in the past month because I was busy with my wedding and honeymoon, but today, as I was sorting through emails, I found one from Vicky. I don't know how she got my email address, and I was completely taken aback. I hesitated over whether to open it or delete it unread, but curiosity got the better of me, so I clicked on it. Inside was a lengthy message from Vicky expressing regret over our strained relationship and her desire to reconcile. She acknowledged the mistakes she made, admitting she had been selfish and immature. Vicky apologized for the pain she caused me over the years and expressed a genuine desire to make amends. She wrote that she feels happy for me now that I'm married and wishes me nothing but the best. She ended the email pleading that I not punish my parents by cutting them off, saying they miss me. Reading her words, I felt a mix of emotions, surprise and skepticism. Part of me wants to believe Vicky has truly changed and is sincere in her apology, willing to work toward repairing our relationship. But another part remains guarded because it seems too good to be true. Regardless of what she wrote, I know my parents don't miss me because, if they did, they wouldn't have treated me this way all these years. I thought about replying but decided against it. After all, forgiveness isn't something to be rushed, it's a process that requires time and reflection. While I'm not sure if I'm ready to forgive Vicky, I don't want to completely burn the bridge either since she's the one who apologized. To be honest, after my marriage, I no longer feel alone. I've learned to recognize that I have my loving husband, supportive friends, and the unwavering love of my grandparents. With their support, I know I can navigate whatever challenges lie ahead without needing Vicky or my parents in my life. I've also looked into it and found a good therapist with whom I've booked my first appointment. I've taken this step to address and resolve any wounds from my past and heal from them.